The morning air around the royal palace felt crisp and gentle, carrying with it the quiet excitement of visitors who had been waiting for this moment. People from different countries stood behind the rope barriers, holding their cameras, phones, and small guidebooks. Some had traveled long distances just to witness the famous royal guards, who were known for their perfect discipline. The palace grounds were clean and shining under the soft sunlight, and the grand building behind the guards stood tall, full of history and pride. Among the visitors was Daniel, a travel photographer in his early 30s who had always been fascinated by traditions that survived through time. He enjoyed learning about different cultures, but what interested him the most were the people who kept those traditions alive. The royal guards were exactly that, symbols of discipline, focus, and strength, standing firm even in the presence of large crowds. Daniel had seen photos and videos of them before, but he wanted to experience the moment himself. He wanted to feel the atmosphere, to be a part of the place, even if only as an observer. Daniel stood near the front, leaning slightly forward to get a better view. He adjusted the strap of his camera and looked at the line of guards. Their uniforms looked polished and spotless, their tall hats perfectly straight, and their faces were completely still. They did not blink often, and they did not react to anything happening around them. Daniel admired their commitment. He wondered what it felt like to stand so still for such long periods, keeping the same expression, no matter what. The crowd around him whispered excitedly. Some people tried to make the guards laugh, while others spoke loudly just to see if they would respond. But the guards remained unmoved, their eyes fixed straight ahead. Their stillness created a sense of mystery. It was as if they belonged to a different world, one where duty came above everything else. A group of schoolchildren walked past Daniel, their teacher reminding them to be respectful. Even they seemed amazed, pointing quietly at the guards and asking questions. Daniel smiled as he watched their curious faces. It reminded him of the first time he became interested in photography, when he saw something that made him want to freeze a moment forever. The area around the palace grew fuller as the scheduled ceremony approached. Tourists lifted their cameras, waiting for the changing of the guard performance. The ceremony was famous for its precision, where every move mattered. Each step, each turn, each sound of the boots on the ground was rehearsed until perfect. Daniel prepared his camera settings, hoping to capture the best angles without disturbing anyone. As he waited, he looked closely at one of the guards who stood nearest to him. The guard's eyes were focused straight ahead, but Daniel could see how carefully he breathed. It was controlled and steady, showing the years of training behind such discipline. Even the tiniest movement was intentional. Daniel admired that. He thought about how simple actions become meaningful when done with dedication. The sun rose higher, casting a soft golden glow on everything. The light made the guards look almost like statues, strong, tall, and silent. A gentle breeze brushed through the crowd, rustling jackets and scarves, but the guards did not react to it at all. Daniel found himself studying every detail, from the texture of their uniforms to the sharpness of their posture. A man near Daniel whispered to his friend, "How do they stand like that for so long?" His friend shrugged, equally amazed. Another visitor softly told her child to stay behind the barrier, explaining that the guards' job was very serious. Everyone seemed to understand that the guards were more than just performers. They represented something important. They carried history, responsibility, and honor, all in their simple act of standing firm. Daniel found himself imagining their daily routines. Did they wake up early to practice? Did they feel tired after hours of standing? Did they enjoy being part of such a centuries-old tradition? He knew he could search these answers later. But right now, he preferred observing them firsthand. The experience felt more meaningful than any article or video could show. A slight shift in the crowd caught Daniel's attention. A few people raised their phones higher, expecting the ceremony to start soon. Palace staff walked along the barrier, reminding everyone to stay behind the ropes. Their calm but firm voices added to the atmosphere of respect and order. Daniel took a slow breath, letting the moment sink in. The air felt rich with anticipation. He looked again at the guard in front of him. Although the guard did not move, there was something quietly powerful about him. His stillness was not empty, it was full of purpose. Daniel thought about how rare it was to see someone so devoted to their role. In everyday life, people rushed, changed direction quickly, or got distracted easily. But these guards lived a different rhythm, one defined by discipline and calm. The more Daniel watched, the more he appreciated the contrast between the busy crowd and the silent guards. The visitors talked, laughed, moved around, and looked for the best view. But the guards remained constant, no matter what. Their presence felt stable, almost grounding. A child in the crowd accidentally dropped a small toy, and it rolled close to one guard's foot. Daniel watched closely. The guard did not react, even though the toy lightly tapped his boot. A palace staff member quickly walked over, picked up the toy, and returned it to the child. The guard stayed exactly as he was, not even shifting his gaze. The crowd murmured in amazement. Daniel clicked a few photos, capturing the contrast between the colorful crowd and the steady guards. He enjoyed photography most when it told a story without words. And this moment, he felt, held a story worth remembering. One about patience, discipline, and human admiration for dedication. A soft chime from the palace clock echoed across the courtyard, signaling that the ceremony would begin soon. People grew quieter, leaning forward with excitement. Daniel adjusted his camera one last time, ready to capture the first movement the guards would make. But before anything began, Daniel took one final look at the guard closest to him. There was something almost peaceful about the stillness on the guard's face. It reminded Daniel that strength does not always show through loud actions. Sometimes, it shows through calmness, consistency, and the silent promise to stand firm. In that moment, Daniel realized why people respected the guards so deeply. It was not just their uniforms or their strict posture. It was the sense of purpose they carried, the quiet dignity that came with serving something bigger than themselves. Daniel felt grateful to witness it up close. He felt connected, even though no words had been exchanged. He lifted his camera again, ready for the next chapter of the day, unaware that something unexpected would soon happen, something that would show the human heart behind the disciplined silence. The excitement in the air grew as the ceremony neared its beginning. People adjusted their cameras, children bounced lightly on their toes, and tour guides reminded their groups to stay respectful and quiet. Daniel felt the energy change. Everything seemed to slow down, as if the whole crowd was collectively holding its breath. The royal guard stood tall and silent, waiting for their cue to begin. Daniel lifted his camera halfway, ready to capture the first movement. Just then, something shifted in the atmosphere. Not the kind of shift tied to excitement, but something different, softer, almost uncertain. A small murmur rose from the left side of the crowd. Daniel turned his head slightly, curious. A woman in her late 70s, dressed in a light lavender sweater and holding a small purse, seemed to wobble gently on her feet. She had been standing close to the front, smiling earlier, enjoying the moment like everyone else. But now her expression looked tired, and her posture seemed weaker, as if the warm sun and long wait had been too much. Daniel wasn't the only one who noticed. A couple standing behind her reached out, trying to steady her. The woman attempted to straighten herself, offering a faint smile, but her legs trembled again. Before anyone could fully react, she softly sank downward, as if her body simply needed rest. She didn't fall harshly, but more like a slow, gentle collapse. Even though there was nothing dangerous in the way she went down, it startled the crowd because it was so unexpected. People gasped quietly, stepping back to give her space. Whispered voices began to float around, filled with worry and confusion. Someone bent down near her, asking if she felt all right. Daniel felt his heart tighten, and before he could think too long, he instinctively moved closer. He wasn't a doctor, but he knew that sometimes even a calm presence could help. But as he approached, he remembered the rope barrier in front of him. Everyone knew that stepping over it was not allowed unless there was permission. The guards were very strict about keeping the ceremonial area clear. Daniel paused right at the edge, unsure if crossing it even for a moment would cause trouble. He looked toward the nearest guard. The guard stood in his traditional posture, still as ever, eyes fixed forward. It was impossible to tell if he had noticed the woman's situation. More people shifted away from the area to make room. A child clutched her father's hand tightly, confused by the sudden change in the quiet celebration. Daniel took a slow breath and leaned down slightly, trying to see if the woman was conscious. She had her eyes closed, but her breathing looked steady. A man nearby placed his jacket gently under her head, trying to make her comfortable. A few concerned faces gathered, speaking softly so they wouldn't disturb the ceremony that had not yet begun. Daniel felt caught between two responsibilities. Should he call out for help? Would that be disrespectful during the ceremony? Would the guards react if he shouted too loudly? He didn't want to upset the order or break any rules, but he also didn't want to ignore someone who clearly needed attention. He glanced at the palace staff, but they were further away, assisting other visitors. For a moment, the crowd looked unsure of what to do. Everyone cared, but no one wanted to interrupt the formal atmosphere around them. Daniel turned again to the guards, wondering if they were trained for unexpected situations like this. Then something subtle changed. The guard closest to the woman, the same one Daniel had been photographing earlier, shifted his eyes. Not his head, not his body, just his eyes. It was barely noticeable, but Daniel caught it instantly. The guard's training kept him still, but he was aware. He wasn't ignoring the situation. He was watching. The crowd grew quieter as more people noticed the woman on the ground. Even though she wasn't in danger, her condition clearly required gentle attention. A few tourists whispered suggestions, but no one wanted to act without certainty. Daniel stayed near the rope, hoping someone with authority would step in soon. Then the unexpected happened. The guard, known for his strict posture and expressionless face, made a small movement. It wasn't big or dramatic, it was a single step forward, smooth and controlled, but unmistakable. The sound of his boot tapping the ground lightly echoed in the space around him. The crowd fell, completely silent. Even the birds seemed to pause their chirping. The guard took another quiet step, then another, moving with a calm purpose that surprised everyone. His posture changed just slightly, enough to show that he was aware of the situation and ready to respond. Daniel watched closely, amazed by how gently the guard approached, as if balancing respect for the ceremony with concern for the woman. Another guard further down the line also stepped forward. Their movements were nearly identical, showing the discipline that defined their training. They didn't rush, they didn't hesitate. They moved in a way that showed confidence, but also calmness. The first guard knelt slowly beside the elderly woman. The crowd held its breath again, watching something they rarely got to see. A guard breaking from his fixed position, not for ceremony, but for compassion. His tall hat angled slightly as he leaned down, and he placed a gloved hand near the woman's arm, not touching her, but assessing carefully. He looked at her face, noticing her breathing, her coloring, and the way she rested. His expression didn't change, but there was something warm in the way he observed her. The second guard positioned himself just behind the first, keeping an eye on the crowd, gently motioning them back without speaking. His movements were protective but polite, making sure the woman had enough space and air. Daniel admired how respectful they were. There was no panic, no confusion, just steady, controlled actions meant to help. One of the tourists quietly said, "They really do care." Others nodded, touched by the simple yet powerful moment. The guards didn't look at the crowd. They focused only on the woman, as if everything else around them had faded away. Daniel noticed how carefully they communicated with one another through tiny gestures, no words, just small signals. It was clear that they were trained for unusual situations, even if people rarely saw this side of their duty. A woman from the crowd offered a small bottle of water, but the guard kindly gestured for her to wait. He wanted to make sure the elderly woman was fully comfortable before anything else. Daniel felt a sense of admiration wash over him. Here were two individuals who were expected to be silent statues, yet they revealed a gentle, human side that made everyone see them differently. The elderly woman opened her eyes slowly, blinking as if waking from a brief nap. The guard beside her gave a slight nod, encouraging her without speaking. She looked momentarily confused, but the calm presence of the guards seemed to reassure her. A light smile appeared on her face, showing gratitude without words. Daniel exhaled softly, realizing he had been holding his breath. The crowd around him relaxed too, whispering warm comments and exchanging relieved looks. Even though nothing dramatic had occurred, the kindness in the moment made it feel important. The palace staff finally reached the area and began guiding the situation. They thanked the guards quietly and checked on the woman with soft, reassuring voices. Everything remained peaceful and respectful. The guards slowly stepped back, returning to their ceremonial positions with the same discipline they had shown before. When they stood still again, it was as if they had never moved. But the crowd knew better. Daniel lifted his camera, feeling a deeper sense of purpose than before. He realized that sometimes the most memorable moments weren't the planned ones. They were the unexpected acts of kindness that revealed the true character of people, even those trained to stand still. The ceremony would soon begin, but something more meaningful had already taken place. A moment where humanity quietly stepped forward, reminding everyone that duty and compassion could exist side by side. The courtyard had become so quiet that Daniel could hear the soft rustle of the nearby trees. It felt as though everyone present was sharing the same breath, the same moment. The two guards who had stepped out of formation now stood beside the elderly woman, their calm actions creating a sense of comfort around her. Even the tourists who had been excited and chatty earlier were now watching with respectful silence. For the first time, Daniel felt he was not just observing, but living inside a story that would stay with him forever. The guard who had knelt beside the woman kept his posture gentle and steady. His gloved hand rested lightly near her shoulder, not touching too firmly, just enough to offer support without overwhelming her. She blinked slowly and looked up, trying to understand what had happened. Her light gray eyes looked tired, but peaceful. She gave a small, grateful nod toward the guard as if saying she appreciated his help, even though she could not speak just yet. The guard acknowledged her silently in a way only someone trained in calm presence could do. A palace staff member leaned down and began speaking softly to the woman, asking her simple questions to make sure she felt all right. The guards continued to watch, ensuring the crowd did not gather too closely. Their posture made it clear they were present for her comfort and safety, not as distant figures but as quiet protectors who understood how to act at the right moment. Daniel lifted his camera but paused before clicking. Something about the moment felt too personal, too gentle to capture without permission. He slowly lowered his camera again, choosing instead to simply observe. He knew he could never fully express the emotion of the scene through a lens, not the warmth in the woman's eyes, not the quiet strength in the guard's posture, not the collective respect the crowd was showing. The guard beside the woman leaned slightly closer, still keeping a respectful distance, and nodded softly as the palace staff explained her situation to him. His face showed no strong expression, but his eyes carried a sense of focus, even though his official duty was to appear still and unreadable. In that moment, Daniel could sense something different, a sincere concern hiding underneath the strict discipline. The second guard, who had been standing slightly behind, widened the space between the woman and the curious onlookers. Without speaking a single word, he guided people back with slow, gentle motions of his hand. No one argued. No one questioned. Everyone understood the importance of giving space, and the guard's quiet direction felt natural, almost like a peaceful wave moving through the crowd. A young girl who had been holding her father's hand looked up at the guard with wide eyes filled with admiration. She whispered something to her father, who smiled and whispered back, "They are here to protect, not just to stand still." The girl nodded thoughtfully, as if learning something valuable about responsibility and kindness. Daniel watched this small exchange and felt a warm feeling settle in his chest. Moments like this reminded him why he loved storytelling, because real life often carried lessons that no script could create, lessons hidden inside simple actions. The elderly woman slowly sat up with the help of the palace staff. Her movements were careful but determined. The guard beside her offered silent support, ensuring she did not feel rushed. Once she sat comfortably, the staff member asked if she needed a break or a cup of water. She smiled softly and nodded, grateful for the attention. Someone from the staff handed her a small bottle, and she sipped gently, her hands steadying as she felt better. Daniel could see that the woman's breathing had calmed. Her face looked less pale, and her smile seemed genuine. The guard remained by her side, watching with quiet confidence. His presence seemed to reassure her more than words could. After a few minutes, the elderly woman looked at the guard and held his gaze. A silent understanding passed between them. She appreciated his help more than she could explain. The guard gave the smallest nod, acknowledging her gratitude in his own disciplined way. It was a simple moment, but Daniel knew it meant something special. Respect didn't always need grand gestures. Sometimes, it lived in quiet nods and steady eyes. Meanwhile, the second guard continued to observe the crowd. Even though the situation was calm now, he remained alert, ready to respond again if needed. His posture stayed strong but not harsh. He was not intimidating. Instead, he radiated calm leadership. The crowd respected him, without needing a single spoken instruction. The palace staff thanked both guards softly before stepping back to speak privately among themselves about the next steps. The elderly woman, feeling steadier, attempted to stand. The guard carefully shifted his weight, ready to assist if she needed it. She placed one hand gently on his arm, using just a bit of support, and rose slowly. The guard moved with her, steadying her movements without taking control away from her. It was a delicate balance, helping without overstepping, and he handled it with flawless grace. As she stood, the crowd let out a quiet sigh of relief. Some people exchanged smiles. Others whispered about the kindness the guards had shown. No one spoke loudly or treated the moment like entertainment. Everyone felt the weight of how meaningful it was. The elderly woman stood tall now, though still cautiously. She looked around at the people, embarrassed for a moment, then bashfully smiled. The crowd responded with warm, encouraging expressions, as if telling her she had nothing to worry about. She glanced again at the guard, her eyes soft with appreciation. Daniel noticed the guard's posture slowly shift back toward his original stance. It was almost like watching a character return to their place on a stage, but with much deeper purpose. The guard glanced once more at the palace staff, who nodded at him with reassurance. With that quiet signal, he stepped away carefully from the woman's side and began moving back to his official position. Each step he took was steady and slow, neither rushed nor dramatic. He walked with the same precision as before, but something about his movement now felt different, not cold or distant, but respectfully thoughtful. He returned to his place in the ceremonial line and paused, adjusting his footing ever so slightly to regain the perfect stance he had held earlier. His tall hat cast a shadow across his face, making him look like the silent, unshakable figure he had been before. Yet, to the people watching, he was no longer just a symbol. He was a human being with a kind heart. The second guard returned to his spot as well, matching the posture of the others with seamless professionalism. If a stranger had walked into the courtyard at that moment, they would never have known anything unusual had happened. But everyone who witnessed it did know. And they felt something they hadn't expected. A deep admiration for the guards. Not just as protectors of tradition, but as individuals who understood the value of human care. Daniel felt a wave of respect washing over him. He raised his camera and finally captured a photo not of the earlier moment, but of the guard standing tall after acting with compassion. It was a symbolic reminder that behind every uniform stood a person capable of kindness. The elderly woman, now feeling much better, was gently escorted to a quieter area by the staff where she could rest comfortably. The crowd began settling again, preparing for the ceremony that was about to begin. But the energy had changed. It was no longer just excitement. It was admiration, respect, and a sense of shared humanity. Daniel knew the ceremony would be beautiful, but the moment he had just witnessed would be the true story of the day. A story of discipline meeting compassion, tradition meeting humanity, and silence being broken not by words, but by actions that spoke louder than anything else. The guards had returned to their stillness, but the hearts of the people watching would carry this memory long after they left the palace grounds. The courtyard slowly returned to its calm rhythm as the palace staff guided the elderly woman to a resting area where she could sit comfortably. The crowd, although still a little shaken by the unexpected moment, began to settle again. People adjusted their cameras, whispered gently to each other, and waited for the ceremony to start. Yet something subtle had changed in the air. A quiet feeling of respect now surrounded the guards, like a soft, invisible blanket. Daniel stood near the front, still holding his camera loosely in his hands. He felt different too, almost as if he had learned something important simply by watching the guards' gentle actions. Earlier, he had admired their stillness and discipline, but now he admired something much deeper: their humanity. They were more than symbolic figures in uniform. They were real people who understood the value of caring, even when tradition demanded that they remain expressionless. The two guards who had stepped out of formation earlier were now back in their original positions. They stood as still as they had before, their boots firmly planted, their gaze fixed forward. To anyone who had not witnessed the moment, they looked exactly the same. But for Daniel and the others who had seen what happened, the guard's stillness now held a quiet grace. It was no longer just about discipline, it was about strength that came from kindness. As the ceremony prepared to begin, the crowd's energy shifted again. But this time, the excitement was mixed with admiration. People no longer looked at the guards with playful curiosity or the desire to catch them smiling. Instead, they watched with respect, almost as though they were seeing the guards for the first time. A man standing near Daniel whispered to his family, "They didn't have to help her. They could have waited. But they didn't. That shows real dedication." His wife nodded, her eyes soft with emotion. A teenager nearby added quietly, "I never knew they could do that. I thought they always had to stay still." Daniel smiled to himself, glad that others felt the same way he did. The guards had broken their stillness, but in doing so, they had earned a level of respect that no strict posture could ever achieve. The palace clock chimed gently, signaling that the official ceremony would begin. The guards prepared to start the changing of the guard routine, each movement timed perfectly. The slow, rhythmic sound of boots echoing on the stone pathway filled the courtyard. It was a sound Daniel had been eager to hear since he arrived, but now it carried a new meaning for him. Every step the guards took seemed to say more than simple tradition. It expressed quiet pride, silent dedication, and the steady heartbeat of history. As the ceremony unfolded, the guards' movements were smooth and precise. Their posture remained flawless, their uniforms neat, and their faces calm. Yet Daniel couldn't stop thinking about how those same hands that now held ceremonial weapons had gently supported an elderly woman only moments ago. That contrast made the performance even more beautiful. It reminded him that duty wasn't just about following rules. It was also about knowing when to put people first. The crowd watched with deeper appreciation. The visitors who had earlier tried to make the guards laugh now stood respectfully, understanding the seriousness of their role. Children, who had once giggled at the tall hats and stiff posture, now gazed with quiet awe. Even the tourists who came only for photos seemed touched by the experience. Daniel lifted his camera again, but this time he photographed the guards with a sense of purpose. He wanted to capture their strength, their dignity, and the warmth hidden beneath the formal uniforms. He took photos of their synchronized steps, the way their uniforms glowed softly in the sunlight, and the peaceful expressions that masked a readiness to help at any moment. As he lowered his camera, he noticed the elderly woman being escorted back toward the crowd. She looked refreshed, her face brighter, and her walk steadier. She gave a small wave to show she was all right, and people around her smiled warmly. The palace staff supported her gently, making sure she felt safe. Daniel watched as she paused to look at the guards again. Her gaze lingered on the one who had knelt beside her. Although the guard did not move a muscle, Daniel imagined that somewhere behind that still gaze, he understood her gratitude. It didn't need words. Their brief connection had already said everything. The ceremony continued with steady rhythm. The guards moved in perfect harmony. But to Daniel, the performance no longer felt like a show. Instead, it felt like a reminder that tradition was made strong, not through strictness alone, but through the people who carried it. People with hearts. People capable of stepping out of line when a human moment called for it. The guards finished the formation shift by taking their final positions, their boots clicking sharply into place. The sound echoed like a closing note in a peaceful song. The crowd responded with soft applause, not loud, not overwhelming, but filled with genuine respect. It wasn't applause for entertainment. It was applause for dedication. Daniel couldn't help but feel emotional. He looked around and saw others wiping their eyes or smiling warmly. Everyone had witnessed something special that day, something that wasn't on any travel brochure or tour guide description. It wasn't just a ceremony. It was a moment of humanity shining through tradition. As the guards resumed their silent positions, Daniel walked a little closer to the rope barrier. He gazed at the guard who had helped the woman, appreciating his calm presence. Even though the guard could not look at him or acknowledge him, Daniel whispered softly, "Thank you." The guard did not react outwardly, but Daniel felt sure the words reached him in spirit. After the ceremony ended, the crowd slowly began to disperse. Some visitors remained, talking about what they saw. Others walked away with a thoughtful silence on their faces. Daniel stayed a few minutes longer, reflecting on everything that had happened. He realized that respect was not something demanded by uniforms or rules, it was something earned through actions. He thought about how the guards' brief break in character had not weakened their image. If anything, it had made them stronger in the eyes of the crowd. Their humanity had added a deeper layer to their duty, showing that real strength lies in knowing when to act. Daniel packed his camera gently, feeling grateful for the experience. He knew that when he shared the story later, people would see the guards differently too. They would see not only tradition and silence, but also compassion and quiet courage. As he walked away from the palace grounds, he looked back one last time. The guards stood tall, still as statues. Yet Daniel knew now that beneath that stillness lived a heart that cared deeply for the people around them. It wasn't just a ceremony he had witnessed. It was a reminder of what true respect looks like, earned not through strictness, but through kindness that appears at the right moment, even if only for a brief, gentle break in character. As Daniel walked away from the courtyard, the gentle breeze carried the soft echoes of the ceremony behind him. The crowd had mostly cleared, leaving the palace grounds peaceful once again. The sunlight seemed warmer now, reflecting off the stone paths and giving the place a calm, almost magical glow. Daniel slowed his steps, feeling that the experience he had just witnessed was too meaningful to rush away from. He wanted to take in every detail before the day moved forward. He found a bench near a row of neatly trimmed bushes and sat down, letting his camera rest on his lap. For a moment, he simply closed his eyes and breathed deeply. It wasn't often that he felt so moved by something he photographed. Usually, He captured landscapes, buildings, lively markets, or bright festivals. But today had shown him a different kind of beauty, one that couldn't be captured in a single frame. Daniel opened his eyes and looked around. The palace, with its tall walls and grand entrance, stood with its usual pride. Yet, he saw it differently now. Behind its traditional rituals and strict customs were people, real people, with emotions, values, and strong hearts. It made him think about how often everyday heroes wore uniforms that made them look distant. Yet underneath those uniforms lived kindness, waiting for the right moment to appear. As he sat there, a palace staff member walked by and gave him a friendly smile. Recognizing him from earlier, Daniel returned the smile. The staff member stopped for a moment and said, "It was quite a moment back there, wasn't it?" Daniel nodded, feeling grateful someone else shared the emotion of it. "It must have been surprising for you," the staff member continued gently. "Most visitors don't get to see that side of them. People think the guards are only meant to stand still or follow tradition, but they're trained to take care of people too. Their discipline isn't just about ceremony, it's about responsibility." Daniel listened with interest. The staff member went on. "They learn that duty means more than holding a straight face. It means understanding when someone needs help and stepping forward without hesitation. They don't break character often, but when they do, it's never for themselves, it's always for someone else." These words stayed with Daniel. They confirmed exactly what he had felt earlier. The guard's stillness wasn't a sign of coldness. It was a symbol of their commitment. And their choice to move, even for a short moment, wasn't a break in duty, it was the deepest expression of it. The staff member nodded politely and walked away, leaving Daniel with even more to think about. He picked up his camera and reviewed the photos he had taken. Some images showed the guards standing tall moments after returning to their positions. Their expressions were calm, their shoulders squared, their uniforms in perfect form. But Daniel knew that behind that stillness was a heart full of compassion. Even though his camera had captured only their outside appearance, the real story lived in the moments he carried inside him. After a few more minutes of resting, Daniel decided to walk toward the Palace Information Center. He wanted to learn more about the history of the guards, their training, and the traditions they represented. The center was quiet inside, filled with displays, photos, and old uniforms behind glass cases. Visitors moved slowly, reading information with interest. Daniel stopped at a display describing the guards' history. It explained how they had been part of the palace for generations, standing through countless ceremonies and events. They were trained not only in tradition, but also in calm decision-making, compassion, and service. The information made Daniel smile. He felt proud for them, even though he didn't know them personally. He continued exploring until he found a small section dedicated to stories from past guards, simple stories, told anonymously, about their experiences. Some stories described children who had been comforted after slipping near the ropes. Others mentioned helping lost tourists or offering support during medical surprises. There were no dramatic moments, just gentle acts of kindness that most people never saw. Reading these stories made Daniel realize that what happened earlier wasn't rare. It was simply rarely noticed. The guard's kindness was not unusual. It was just quiet, performed behind the stillness that everyone focused on. Feeling inspired, Daniel left the information center and walked back toward the courtyard. The ceremony had ended long ago, and a new set of guards now stood in place. They held the same posture, the same calm expression, the same steady gaze. Daniel watched them with new eyes. He felt almost connected to them, even though they remained silent and still. He respected them deeply now, not because they never moved, but because they knew exactly when to move. As he stood there quietly, a small group of tourists approached, laughing softly and taking pictures. One of them spoke loudly, trying to make the guards smile. Daniel felt a sudden urge to explain the importance of respecting their space, but instead, he simply watched. The guard did not respond, maintaining perfect discipline. But Daniel knew what lay beneath that expression. The guard standing before him was not just performing a role. He was honoring a promise, one that included both tradition and compassion. Daniel lifted his camera again and took one last photo. This time, the picture wasn't just about the uniform or the ceremony. It was about the story behind the stillness, the heart inside the silence, and the human kindness hidden within tradition. Daniel began walking toward the exit of the palace grounds, feeling lighter than when he arrived. He knew he had something special to share with the world. Not just beautiful photos, but a story that carried meaning. As he stepped outside the gates, he saw the elderly woman sitting comfortably on a bench with a warm drink in her hands. She looked cheerful now, surrounded by palace staff ensuring she felt safe. Daniel gave her a small wave, and she returned it with a gentle smile that said she was doing well. That simple moment filled Daniel with peace. It made the story complete. Later that evening, when Daniel returned to his hotel room, he opened his laptop and began typing. He didn't want to forget anything. He wrote about the stillness of the guards, the unexpected moment in the crowd, the silent compassion, and the deep respect that grew within the hearts of everyone present. He wrote the story as if telling it to a friend, with honesty and warmth. He described how tradition and humanity stood side by side, and how a brief break in character revealed more about the guards than hours of ceremony ever could. When he finished writing, he leaned back in his chair and smiled. This wasn't just a travel experience. It was a lesson, a reminder that respect is earned through actions, that kindness needs no words, and that sometimes the strongest people are the ones who know when to step forward gently. Daniel closed his laptop and looked out the window at the calm night sky. The stars shimmered softly, as if approving the story he had just written. He felt grateful, fulfilled, and humbled. The next morning, when he shared his story and photos online, people from all around the world responded with admiration and emotion. Some said they had never thought about the guards beyond their uniforms. Others said the story changed how they viewed discipline and duty. Many simply thanked Daniel for showing the compassionate side of tradition. And so, the simple moment Daniel witnessed one quiet act of kindness reached far beyond the palace courtyard. It touched hearts, reminded people of humanity, and showed the world that even those trained to stand still carry kindness within them. A brief break in character had revealed respect not only from the guards, but from everyone who now understood them a little better.